welcome again to chesslecture.com. My name is Dana Mackenzie. Today I'd like to talk with you about a tactical motif that I've never actually seen mentioned in a book, and I call it reversing the move order. I wish I could show you the game that first made me aware of this idea. It was a game played by Kasparov sometime in the 1980s, and it appeared in Robert Burns' New York Times chess column. I heard that Kasparov played two moves in a row that would have been completely ordinary moves, except for the fact that he played them in the opposite order from what you would normally expect. And that reversal of the move order turned it into a brilliant combination. I thought at the time, wow, that's a really cool trick. Unfortunately, since then I've lost the newspaper clipping, and when I was getting ready for this lecture I was not able to figure out which Kasparov game that was. And actually, I'd appreciate anyone who could figure that out for me. Nevertheless, the lesson stuck with me, even if the game didn't. So today I'm going to do the next best thing and show you some of my games where this tactical motif occurred, or should have occurred. The fact is, it's harder to remember this idea than you'd think. Most of the time in my games, an opportunity comes along to reverse the normal move order, and I just overlook it, and I don't realize until later when I go over the game, either by myself or with a computer, that I've missed this opportunity. So I'm personally still struggling with this concept. But as Jesse Cry says, one way to improve in chess is to identify things that you're repeatedly doing wrong and try to understand why. So in this lecture I'll also try to talk a little bit about why I'm missing these ideas of reversing the move order. And maybe some of you will find that you're missing this idea also in some of your games. And if you look for it, maybe you'll be able to spot it. Okay, so I'm going to go over three examples from recent games of mine. The first is a game that took place earlier this year. My opponent was named Elon Benjamin. He's an expert who lives in the same town that I do, and so we end up playing each other quite a bit. And we usually have very good games, and this game was no exception. So I'm going to skip ahead to the position where reversing the move order could have made a big difference to me. So this is the position we got to after Black's 24th move. So it's now White to move. I'm White. Elon Benjamin is Black. Let's first of all talk about the position in general. First of all, one thing you might notice is Black is a pawn up. Okay, so this opening was a King's Gambit, and I have not yet recovered my Gambit pawn, but White does have a great deal of compensation for the pawn. In particular, a second thing you should notice is that Black's queen side is still not fully developed. The Queen Knight hasn't come out, and the Queen Rook hasn't come out. And in fact, it's very hard for Black to bring out the Queen Knight right now because all of its development squares are blocked. And as long as the Knight can't move, the Rook is also cut off from playing any meaningful role in the game. So that's a very important thing to notice. And third, the other important thing to notice is that White has a mate in two threat. If you imagine letting White play two moves in a row without giving Black a move in between, then White could checkmate with either Knight to d4 followed by Rook to e8 check, or with Knight to f4 followed by Knight to g6 check. So the question then arises of whether there is some way to cash in on this mate threat, even though, of course, Black is allowed to make a move to defend. And I find that this technique is often a useful way to find a combination. Imagine what you would do if you were given two moves in a row, and then that gives you an idea of how you should proceed, even if your opponent does play a move in between. Now, so in this position, I'm sure I must have, at least subconsciously, looked at Knight to d4 and Knight to f4. But I ruled them out pretty quickly because I saw that either one of those moves, for example, Knight to d4, could be answered by pawn takes knight on g5. And then the mating threat no longer works because the bishop on f7 is hanging. And so without giving it any more thought than that, I started looking for ways to improve the position so that the mate threat would be harder to defend. And I came up with the move bishop to g6, which I thought was a great move. I was really excited at the time, but it turns out it was the wrong move. My thinking was that now, after black plays pawn takes knight, white will play knight to d4, and the checkmate on e8 is virtually unstoppable. Unfortunately, there was one hole in my thinking, which was that I forgot that when you offer a sacrifice, your opponent does not have to take it. And in fact, black has much better moves here than pawn takes knight. My opponent played bishop takes knight on e2. And the point here is now, after I played rook takes e2, he's now cleared the a6 square for his knight to come out. And now I have no checkmate on e8. And so now white's attack is no longer quite as dangerous, and the game ended up in a draw. I'll show you a few more moves just so you'll see what happened. I played knight to e4. He played bishop d4. I played g4. He played knight to c5. The weakness of the a-pawn forces me to trade knights. And now we have a bishops of opposite colors position. I played rook to e7, but basically there's no hope of winning this position anymore, because white does not have enough material on the board to checkmate black's king. And after bishop takes pawn and rook takes pawn, we get to bishops of opposite color endgame where I don't have any real advantage, and it ended up being a draw after a few more moves. So let's go back to the original position and see what I missed. So remember that the theme of this lecture is reversing the move order. So what I should have done before I played, I played bishop to g6 with the idea of playing knight to d4 next. And what I should have done, just on general principle, was ask myself if there's any point in playing them in the opposite order. So instead of bishop g6 first, what happens if I play knight to d4 first? Well, as I said, what probably kept me from playing this move was the black would play pawn takes knight. But I could then follow up with bishop to g6. And now we've gotten to exactly the position that I wanted to get to in the other line. So the point of moving the knight first, at least one point, was that black was not given any other alternatives. After knight to d4, the mate threat is too powerful, so black had to defend the mate threat right away. He didn't have time to do anything else. And so he's forced into playing pawn takes knight, which is not as good a move as the bishop takes knight was, because black still hasn't solved his problem of getting the queen knight out. So now in this position, with the moves order reversed, how can black stop the checkmate? Well, it turns out that black has only one legal move to prevent the checkmate, and that's to play bishop to e2. So already we can see this is looking better than that other line, because in the other line, when he moved his bishop to e2, he got my knight with it, but in this line, he doesn't get anything. So I just go rook takes bishop. And now, of course, he plays knight to a6, and that defends the checkmate at e8. All right, now you might still wonder, so what does white accomplish by doing this different move order? Because we kind of have a similar material, exactly the same material count as in the game. But here there's a big difference. Okay, the difference is that knight on d4. What that knight does is, of course, it can't stay there for long, but just by being there for one move, it cuts black's bishop off from the defense of his king. So white now has the very powerful move, rook to f2 check. And black cannot bring his bishop back to f6 to defend. So his only move is to go king to g8. And now white plays knight to f5 with very, very powerful threats. So the knight here is much better placed than the knight that I had in the game. Remember, in the game, my knight ended up going to e4, where it had no threats. But here the knight is on f5 and threatens a very big check with knight to e7 check. So let's look at a few variations. White is actually winning by force here, and it's kind of amazing. So for example, let's look at a relatively bad move, rook to f8. Well, that would lose right away because white goes knight to e2, e7 check, king is forced to h8, and then white goes rook to f8, it takes f8 checkmate. So we can see that one point of this variation is that white is forcing black's king into the corner, and the king finds himself in a mating net there. Okay, now you might say, okay, well, that rook move was kind of a bad move because it's putting the rook right where it could be taken. So let's look for a better move. Suppose black plays knight to c5. That seems like a decent move. It's activating the knight, threatening the pawn on a4, but it also doesn't work. White still plays knight to e7. Again, black is forced into the corner, and again, his king is in a mating net. It's got no squares. And so all white has to do is play rook to f3. And now we see the checkmate not along the back rank, but along the h file, which has been opened up because of that pawn capture, the pawn on h6 taking my knight on g5. And so how does black defend the checkmate? He's only got one way, which is to play g4, but then I just play rook to f5, threatening checkmate again. Again, black has only one way to defend. That's bishop to c1, so that he can interpose his bishop on h6 after rook to h5 check. But then white simply grabs the knight on c5, and white is a piece up with the one game. Let's look at a couple more lines, because it's just really neat, all the different combinations here. So you might say, okay, well, knight c5 wasn't a very great move, because that also kind of put a piece where white could take it. So let's try to find a better move. Well, one thing you might think is, okay, black's problem is his king is getting chased to the corner. So why don't we move it back towards the center where it's a little bit safer and play king to f8? Then white will play knight to e7, discovered check, and black has only one move, bishop to f6. But, you know, this is looking somewhat promising for black, because he's now getting the bishop into the defense. Unfortunately, once again, black is in a mating net. White again plays rook to f3. And believe it or not, black can't do anything, because white is now threatening to go rook to h3, and again, rook to h8, with a checkmate on the back rank. If black plays g4, which is really his only defense, then I go rook to f5, once again, setting up the same threat. So, really beautiful idea here. And, you know, if black tries to, you know, play a waiting move or something like that, you know, just move the rook, then rook over, and even bishop takes knight doesn't get black out of trouble, because rook to h8 is still checkmate. So, there's one more line that may be worth looking at, which I really doubt that anyone would have come up with, any human, but the computer comes up with this, which is to play g4, which actually anticipates white's rook threat. But even on this, white comes out with a very big advantage, probably winning advantage. Okay, after bishop c8, now again, this stops the checkmate, but white can simply go rook takes pawn, winning a pawn. And now the threat of bishop to d3 is just lethal, winning a piece. So black cannot survive in this position either. So going back to the original position, we can see that white missed, that I missed a really beautiful combination. I mean, this would have been not only a win, but a wonderful win. And it's all because I didn't appreciate the importance of the move order, that playing knight to d4 first, followed by bishop to g6, was more effective than playing bishop to g6, followed by knight to d4. So little subtleties of move order can make a huge difference. Okay, here's my second example of a position where I needed to reverse the move order. This is a game that I played in 2003 against a player named Nikolai Andrianov, roughly 2400 player. And again, let's look at this position. So basically, white has given up 2 pieces for a rook, but I do have a very strong kingside attack. I've sort of flushed black's king out into the open, and now I play queen takes pawn check, which forces bishop to g7. And so now the question is, how does white proceed with the attack? Now here again, I moved too impulsively and didn't think about reversing the move order. The move I played was rook takes pawn check. Now I have to admit that I had been lusting after this move for several moves in this game. I've just been waiting for the right opportunity to play it. So, big bold rook sacrifice. But as it turns out, it doesn't quite work. So here's what happened. My opponent played pawn takes rook. I go queen takes pawn check. He goes king g8. And now I played knight d5. And of course, this is the point of my rook sacrifice, this knight d5 move, because white is now threatening the queen, also threatening knight to e2 check, which would set up a mating net, very similar to our last game, by the way. And if black goes bishop takes knight, then I go queen takes bishop check, forking the king and rook. So after king to h7, I go queen takes rook. And now, after, say, something like bishop takes pawn, I now have a rook in 2 pieces for the bishop and knight. Plus, I have just a killing attack, because his king is completely wide open. And I could do something like, say, queen to f8, threatening rook to e7 check, and this game is just going to be over pretty soon. So, in my analysis, I saw all of this, and I saw knight to d5 coming, and I was just so excited. I thought, I'm winning this game by force. I'm beating a 2400 player, which is pretty good for me. So, unfortunately, as in the last position, I failed to take into account all of my opponent's possible replies. In fact, black has one good move here, which is to play rook to f8, and that's what Andrianov played. And here, white can win back his rook, which is nice. Queen takes rook check, king takes queen, and knight takes queen. So white's recovered the sacrificed rook. But after bishop takes pawn, we now have a vastly different position from the previous one that we looked at, because the queens are off the board. And with queens off the board, white no longer has the kind of overwhelming attack that he did in the other variation. And in fact, here I played knight to e6 check. He went knight takes knight. I played rook takes knight, and black won this game in pretty short order, because the 2 bishops are just much, much more powerful than a rook. And even though I have connected passed pawns on the king side, they're just way too slow to really make any difference. All right, so basically, after the game, I just chalked it up to, well, that my sacrifice wasn't quite good enough. But then when I went over the game later with the computer showed me what I did wrong. And again, it's a matter of just reversing the move order. So we see that white's idea in the previous line was rook takes pawn check, followed by knight to d5. So why not reverse those 2 moves? Why not go, instead of rook takes pawn check, go knight to d5 first? Well, this is a move that never even occurred to me. And the reason it didn't occur to me was that I was so focused on sacrificing my rook. I was almost hypnotized by that move. And also, knight to d5, it looks like I'm just sticking the knight out there for no reason. Just hanging the knight. What's the point? But of course the point is that by playing this move first, I'm forcing black to go into the a better line for me. I'm taking away that rook to f8 defense that he had in the other variation. So in this variation, black will have to play bishop takes knight. And now I play my rook sacrifice, my beautiful rook sacrifice. And now everything works like butter. Queen takes pawn check, king to g8, forced, queen takes bishop check, and I get my fork of the king and rook, and I have a winning position, as we saw earlier. So once again, I was on the threshold of a beautiful combination, but I just didn't think about reversing the move order. Okay, now let's look at one more example of reversing the move order. This came from my most recent tournament, the National Open in Las Vegas in June of 2007. So in this game, I'm white once again, and my opponent is Eugene Yanite, who's a FIDE master, rated, I believe, in the 2300s, maybe even the 2400s. And we're looking at the position after I've played my 23rd move, which was queen to d2. And well, so let's see what's going on in this position. So it's black's move here, and the sort of move that I was expecting black to play was rook to c8. So he's been trying to get a queenside attack going for some time. But in this position, I felt that after I play king to b1, my king would really be pretty safe from any queenside attack. And moreover, I think black would be now in a great deal of trouble, because white is now planning to go bishop to d4, forcing a trade of the dark squared bishops, and then after the trade of the dark squared bishops, white will go pawn takes pawn and invade along, that is, h pawn takes g pawn, and invade along the h file with a likely mating attack. So the more I looked at this position, the happier I was for white. I really felt that I had a very big advantage here. Now, there is one sort of slight blemish on the in white's position, one dark cloud on the horizon, which is that black could play rook to e8 instead of rook to c8. And the point of this move is that white has sort of a stack up of pieces on this e file. So black is actually threatening a skewer. So for example, if in this position white were to play bishop to d4 as per the plan, then black might play bishop takes pawn, with the idea that after pawn takes bishop, black will go queen takes bishop, winning back the piece. So that's a possibility, but as I continued to look at it, I felt pretty happy with white's game here, because instead of taking the bishop, white would just go bishop takes bishop, sort of continuing to pursue the whole kingside attack idea. And now, if king takes bishop, queen to d4 check, and king to g8, pawn takes pawn, and things are really going. White's really got a good attack going here. So I wasn't afraid of that at all. Actually, the computer points out, and this is just an aside, that so if white plays bishop d4, black plays bishop takes pawn, bishop takes bishop, the computer actually comes up with this move, bishop takes pawn, which is kind of nasty because black has some ideas now of checkmating white's king on the c file. Nevertheless, the computer says that after bishop to f6, white gets a very good game. After knight to d5, bishop takes queen, rook to c1 check, c8 check, queen to c3, knight takes queen, pawn takes knight. A lot of tactics there, but basically in this position, say after rook takes pawn and king to b7, rook to c2 check, king to b1, rook takes bishop, the dust clears and white is still going to end up a piece ahead. So, so a very complicated line, but basically it is in white's favor. So anyway, that's the sort of thing that computers are good for. So the upshot is, after rook to e8, white would have a very comfortable position, probably a winning position. So I was sitting here feeling very happy with myself, and my opponent, knight, was thinking and thinking and thinking. And finally he comes up with a beautiful move, beautiful idea, which I completely missed. So see if you can come up with the idea yourself. It's based on the idea of reversing the move order again. So what we saw was that rook to e8 followed by bishop d5 check doesn't work. So why not reverse the move order? Instead of playing the rook move first, play the bishop move first. And so that's exactly what the knight did. And I was totally stunned. I had not seen this coming. And it's completely different. Because now, if white tries the bishop d4 business, it's not going to work because black is going to play bishop takes pawn, and black is now getting all that mating threat stuff going much too quickly. And plus, black has also won 2 pawns in this variation. So, the more I looked at this, the more I realized that this is just no good for white. And so, by playing the sacrifice in this order, black is forcing white to recapture with the pawn. And now black plays rook to e8, and we go into that other line, which is not as good for white, because now after I play bishop to d4, black plays queen takes bishop, and if I play bishop takes bishop, which is what I did do in the game, black can play queen d2 check, and he succeeds in getting the queens off the board before white can get his kingside attack going. And what happened in the game was that I played rook takes queen, he went pawn takes bishop, king takes bishop, and black is now a pawn up, and eventually, thanks to a few more mistakes on my part, black won the game. Now I should emphasize that this was not actually a winning combination for black. If we go back to this position, when I went over this game later with the computer says I should have played, instead of rook takes queen, I should have played knight takes queen, which makes perfect sense, because after king takes bishop, I played knight to e4, and now the knight is very strongly posted. Or even better would be to throw in a check first with h6 check, king g8, followed by knight to e4. And the computer evaluates this as being completely equal, and I have to agree, because black is a pawn up, but the extra pawn, the pawn on f7, is very easily blockaded by white. White is, of course, threatening already right away a knight check that would fork the king and rook, and also threatening knight takes pawn. So this would be really, really fine for white. So, of course, black probably should go king f8 instead. But even on this move, knight to e4 is really strong, threatening to sink my knight in on f6, also threatening knight takes d6. And in fact, the computer here recommends f5 as being black's best line, actually giving back the pawn, but hoping to create some pawn weaknesses on f6 and h6. So, again, that's a little bit of a sideline. I just wanted to point out that black's move, his combination was not a winning combination, but it was a combination that completely changed the course of the game from one where white was thinking about winning to a position where white is just thinking about hanging on for a draw. And moreover, I think it had a huge psychological effect on me because I just didn't see this move at all. And so after black played this move, I was then not in a frame of mind to play the best defensive moves. And so, so after this, even though white should have enough compensation for the pawn, I was too rattled to come up with the right moves. And so black ended up winning the game and not just drawing it. Okay, so what have we learned from these 3 examples? I think that the message here is that anytime you have 2 moves that are closely related or are closely linked to each other, you're planning to play move A followed by move B. And, they're sort of a package like that. You should always think about what happens if I reverse the move order. So, as you're reaching out to play move A, just ask yourself for 30 seconds, what if I play move B first? Now, a lot of the time, it won't make any difference. It'll just transpose, and that's fine. So then you go ahead and play move A. Sometimes playing move B first might just be plain ridiculous, and that's okay too. But every now and then, as in these three examples, if you consciously ask yourself that question, you'll discover that playing move B first actually is better. So asking yourself this question and looking for deliberately reversing the move order kind of forces you to think outside the box and think about a move that might not have been originally on your candidate move list. So a move like bishop takes pawn in this example, or in the last example, a move like knight to d5, or in the first example, a move like knight to d4. These moves that seem to just give away a piece, but made perfectly good sense once you saw what was coming up next. So I hope this lecture has given you something interesting to think about. As I said, it's a tactical idea that I've never actually seen mentioned in a book. And if you can pull it off, you might save yourself a half point or even win a full point sometimes. So for chesslecture.com, this is Dana Mackenzie signing off.
Grandmaster Damian Lemos here for onlinechesslessons.net. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to receive more free chess videos from us, you can just click the subscribe button below. I would also highly recommend signing up for my free mail course, the 10 Grandmaster Secrets to Dominate Chess. During this exclusive course from onlinechesslessons.net, I'll share with you my own Grandmaster shortcuts to effective attacking, defending, and growth hacks to improving your chess without complicated books or memorization. So sign up by clicking the sidebar on the right, and I know you won't be disappointed. Once more, this is Damian for onlinechesslessons.net, and I'll see you in my videos. Thank you.